Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. My name is Anna. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I am Family Equality's Associate Director of Archives, Storytelling, and Brand. So that's a long, fancy way of saying I am facilitating tonight's discussion. Tonight we are talking about man-made in search of dads, daddies, father figures, and fatherhood. In this memoir, Steve Majors takes us on a journey of his own self-discovery as he grows from a gay boy in search of a father figure to a gay man grappling with what it means to be a father himself. Man-Made explores what happens when littles don't want to grow up to be like their dads, but want to grow up to be loved by men who stand in for their fathers. Boys who put up with bullying from an older brother, taunts from the gym teacher, long hours from a boss, and even discipline from a gay daddy, all as a means to discover what kind of man they truly want to be. And I'm excited to be joined tonight by this book's author, Steve Majors. Steve is the author of High Yella, a modern family memoir. His writings have been published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Boston Globe, CNN Opinion, NBC Think, and more. Steve is also a friend of Family Equality, having led our organization's communications work at the height of the fight for marriage equality. So thank you for the work that you've done for our organization, and thank you for being here. Welcome, Steve.
And thank you so much. I can't tell you what a pleasure it is in many ways to come home to Family Equality and to be able to have this conversation with all of your supporters and members.
Yes, it's a perfect, I was telling Steve before folks got on, this is a perfect marriage of our work and his, because this book is really truly what it says in the title, an exploration of gay fatherhood. And I think it'll resonate with a lot of the folks that we talk to every day. But before we dive into a discussion, I would love for us to start on the same page, literally. So Steve, if you wouldn't mind beginning with a reading.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm going to read a chapter called Coach. As gay men, there's a patient zero who infects us all with our first sense of longing and then later belonging. The first of mine comes when I am 4. While the big kids are at school and most of the adults are working, I am left in the care of my grandmother's elderly companion, John. He uses his worn leather belt to hitch me behind his waist as he drives a tractor across the field. Other times he scoops me up on the bench seat of his old Ford truck, and we bounce along the country roads. I like it best when he turns the corner, and I careen across the vinyl seats and come to rest against his side, where his jacket smells of faint pipe tobacco, cow manure, and the outdoors. Although I feel close to John, it's another farmer to be exact, a farmer's son who I yearn to be next to. A few fields of corn away lives old Mr. Bean with his son and daughter. Old Bean, as we call him, is a wrinkled, shriveled little thing, rarely moving from his rocking chair. His spinster daughter cares for him, while his bachelor son tends to the farm. Bean is so old his children must be adults, but to me they seem no more grown than my teenage brothers and sister. Tall, gangly, and naive to the world. Today I cannot summon their names or their faces from the past. I've long since replaced the long-lost memory of how they looked with images of Jethro and Ellie Mae from the Beverly Hillbillies. Were they really country cartoonish, or do I just remember the wide-eyed wonder they showed whenever we came to visit? Much later, I'll realize that my visits represented relief from their insular world. Caring for a farm and an elderly parent didn't leave them any time to go and visit with outside folk. When John drops me off for a few hours while he attends to business in town, Old Bean's daughter plops me in her lap and cradles me like a baby doll. She brushes my hair and sings lullabies while Old Bean snores in his chair. Well, like any little boy, I like being stroked and caressed by her. But there's another I want to be held by. My eyes keep returning to the front door, where Old Bean's son will come in from the fields for lunch. When he finally does, I jump down on the floor and crawl around his grimy work boots, scrambling up on his leg onto his lap. As he bounces me on his knee, I run my fingers across the stubble on his face. I touch his nose, his chin, his big ears, and then finally the straggly long hair that falls from underneath his cap. If I were blind, it would explain why I must map his face. If I were a baby, it might mean I'm trying to figure out the world around me. But I'm a big boy now, or so people tell me. So it's likely a strange thing to do to a grown man who is not my flesh and blood. Still, old Bean's son just laughs at me as I push my nose into the hollow beneath his work shirt to smell where he's been. When lunch is over, he lifts me like a newborn calf and gently hands me to his sister. He tussles the top of my head and heads back outside to his farm work. My eyes return to the door, hoping he'll somehow return before dusk, before John comes back to fetch me. Within a year, I'm in kindergarten, and there's no need for John or old Bean's kids to mind me anymore. I ride the school bus instead of the back of John's tractor, and grim nuns smelling of pencil shavings and copper and copier fluid make me sit up straight in hard wooden chairs and keep my hands to myself. I watch the classroom door sometimes and long for old Bean's son to come through it and carry me away in his arms. But soon I have another man to replace him. The nuns announce they have found a new PE teacher. We're too old, they tell us, for just walks around the block or visits to the playground with a stay-at-home mom who volunteers. Now we have a grown-up guy who will teach the boys how to play boy games, while the nuns gather the girls to skip rope. As he marches us boys into the cavernous Catholic social hall next door, I'm excited. I cut the line so I can march right behind him and see Coach up close. His curly hair, shaggy mustache, and hairy legs stick out from under his shorts. But I remind myself to hold my arms at my side as the nuns tell me. Otherwise, they might reach up to feel the white cotton t-shirt he has tucked in so neatly, or the whistle around his neck. Making a good impression is important because the nuns tell me I am the best boy in my class. I need to show my new PE teacher I am special too. I want him to like me the best. Go stand on the line, Coach barks at us. Tweet! I run to get in place. As I look down the line, point to one of us and make us show him what we can do. Like 10 jumping jacks, 5 sit-ups, or running in place for 30 seconds. Tweet! Quiet! Now let's get started. Coach whistles and points at a boy one by one. I'm nervous as I wait for my turn. Suddenly he looks me in the eyes. His lips pinch tight around the whistle he's been holding in his teeth. He points at me. Tweet, fly, he yells. I take off across the floor of the makeshift gym. My short legs pump as fast as they can. My arms extend wide and then flap. I run in circles, then in figure eights. I go faster and faster. Tweet, 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 tweet. I look up. Coach is waving me back into line. The whistle drops from his lips, and he has a huge grin on his face. Coach has noticed me. I figure I am now his best boy. But as I slow down into a jog and come in for a landing back into my spot in line, I hear Coach cough back a laugh. The kids are laughing too. Some are doubled over. Coach takes a deep breath and wipes his eyes. Get back into line. And Majors? Yes, Coach? You're fly. I do not understand. There's been no dad, no man to explain what I've done wrong, what I don't know about being a boy. He points at my crotch. Your zipper. I tug the zipper up on my denim shorts and hang my head. All the boys are laughing. Coach joins in. For the first time in my life, I realize I will be different from other boys who know the secret male codes and rituals passed on from their dads. No one has taught me what a fly is. No one will teach me how to hawk spit instead of dribble, shake my penis after peeing, or blow my nose by closing one nostril with a finger and snorting. And men like Coach will not think to teach me either, nor will they let me feel the stubble on their faces or crawl over their bodies. I am not their best boy. In the next few years, gym class becomes a place I want to escape. But over time, I begin to recognize that I'm not alone anymore. There's another boy in PE just like me. We're different. I'm short. He is super tall. He is school pencil thin, while my belly bulges so much now that I have to lean out and double over just to check the zipper on my pants. But we both run from the balls, the ones kicked, fast pitched, soft thrown, dribbled, and tossed. We stand awkwardly in lines, never seeming to measure up as the coaches blow whistles and the captains choose teams. We cringe when our names are called, expecting to hear a chorus of groans in response. In the locker room, we scatter when the laughter gets too loud and wet towels begin to snap and crack. We scurry with underwear beneath our towels and race walk to the showers with eyes down, hoping we can be first in or first out. His name long escapes me, but each year we are joined by other soft boys like us. Just like Coach, people point us out and note where we fail to find a place on the straight lines they have drawn for us. And they call us by single names, though rarely by our first or last. Instead, we are known as fag, sissy, or queer. Though we never acknowledge it to one another, we see that we are indeed different from the other boys. But there is some solace. For the first time in our lives, we understand that we share a sense of longing for something we cannot quite name. Because of that, we discover we are not alone in this world. Instead, we learn that together we belong.
Yay! Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was the perfect chapter to read because it really captures, I think, what a lot of the book is about. You're exploring these different male figures in your life, and you talk about this the longing that you don't have the words for yet, which I think is what so much of the book is covering. So thank you for sharing that and picking such a great piece. I've had the pleasure of reading this book over the past few weeks, and I really am blown away by the vulnerability that you brought to it and the level of reflection that you put towards some really challenging and really nuanced topics. So I am excited to dig into those topics a little bit more in our discussion. That leads us to the Q&A. So I have a few questions prepared, but I welcome our attendees to pop their own questions into the chat or the Q&A feature if anything comes to mind. Let me just, here we go. All right. I think maybe we can start at the very beginning, which is just what inspired you to write this book?
Sure. I think this is certainly not a book that I could have written at any other point in my life. Um, I have a previous book, sort of another memoir. I consider this sort of a memoir and essays, but a previous book that really looked at my search for identity. Growing up as a white passing, mixed race young boy in an all black family, and my search for identity in that family, my family of birth, and the family that I created, which is a family with two dads, two daughters who are adopted, both of whom identify as black. And so as I finished that book and put that down, I felt like there was something missing, something about my story that I hadn't shared that I thought might be relevant for other men, other parents. And as I reflected on what that was, I felt like I don't think it was consciously done, but I felt like there was a part of my identity that I put to the back, and that was my identity as a man, as a gay man, and as a gay dad. I certainly addressed those themes in the first book, but I felt like there was more that I wanted to explore for myself. And when I thought about the stories that I might tell in this book, I always write from a place of, I guess, trying to make meaning. I think all writers, whether they're writing fiction or nonfiction, ultimately are trying to make meaning of their own lives, meaning of the world around them, and how they fit into that world. And as I reflected on the identities of, gay man and gay dad, I wanted to make meaning of the journey that I had taken. What were the factors, the influences that made me who I am today, good and bad? And I grew up without a dad. Um, but along the way, there were these male figures in my life, some who were explicit father figures, and others who were just formative, who formed me into the person that I am today, good, bad, or indifferent. And I wanted to tell their stories. I wanted to tell the story about my relationship to them. And I wanted readers to come away with that same sense of curiosity and wonder that I did about how the people around us, people who are not even related to us by blood, come to like shape who we are as people in the world.
That's beautiful. I do feel like one of my big takeaways from the book was this idea of, I want to say chosen family, but then you also explore a few folks in your life who maybe you didn't choose. They came into your life and are part of your family. And I just really appreciated, that a book about fatherhood and about father figures is able to take that kind of zoomed out look at, like, it's not just, this traditional idea of what a father is. It's the gym teacher, it's
Yeah.
the other boys in the gym class who are like me, who taught me how to be more like myself. Those little moments make a person. So that was really lovely to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
but
I'm so just to add just this other thought, and I think we sometimes discount those people in our lives, and in some places in the book I honor them, and in some ta places I point out where their influence on me may not have been positive, in the moment, but they certainly shaped me who I am. So they led by example and led by example of what not to do and what not to be.
yeah, I also really appreciated that there are you were when I say your vulnerability in the book, I think I'm also referring to the fact that you did talk about people who maybe, were not the best examples of fatherhood or about masculinity. Masculinity is another big theme in the book. And you grew up around some very traditional ideas of masculinity. I'm curious if you are willing to share, where have you landed in terms of what healthy masculinity looks like, and how did you find that?
Yeah. I mean, as I think about it, somebody recently asked me this question, and um, I mean, the idea that I formed is, masculinity is not biology, nor is it even identity. It's an expression, right? And you choose if you're going to express yourself in this way. And I grew up, you're right, around very traditional role models of what masculinity was meant to be. Some of those I accepted, some I rejected. I, you know, I think about the fact as a young boy, uh, people would have found me, and people told me that I was effeminate, and I just was being myself. I think today, when you ask about where I've landed, I guess I don't know where I've landed, but I do know what I've lost and what I've gained. I, my brothers were um, loving in their own way, but rather rough on me in how they shaped me, as were other family figures. And they um, would not accept expressions that were not traditionally masculine. And I think about that today, and I think about if not for them, if not for other figures in my life, if not for society at that time, I might be a different person. My expression might be different than what it is today. And I make no judgment about that. I don't feel like I'm performing in any way. This is just who I am, who I've come to be based on the forces that have shaped me. But I do think I probably would have been different. People might have experienced me differently if not for those things that told me that this is what it means to be a boy. This is what it means to be a man. Um, this is who I am today. I can't evaluate that. Like, I am, um, I don't call myself masculine. I don't call myself feminine. I just call myself who I am. But I do know the world still, for some people, for a lot of men, do ex have this expectation, this burden of masculinity that they impose on us.
Yeah, I think that that comes through as someone who did not have that experience growing up. I felt that throughout a lot of the book, this sense of, gosh, there's just this weight, there's this expectation on you that is shaping you at every corner. And I think it's fair to say that that's a loss, right? To it's fair to spend time mourning who you could have been at the same time as celebrating all the work you've done to be the person that you are now. Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to make space for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um, a lot of this book is about looking for a father figure, as the title would suggest, specifically models of manhood that are healthy. Now that you've gone on this search, what advice would you give to other little or not so little boys who are also looking for like a man to look up to?
Yeah. I, if I could, I'd like to sort of switch that question just slightly. Um, I think for the men out there, do not discount the influence that you have on the young people in your life, um, no matter how they identify. But let's just talk about boys. I mean, that gym teacher probably forgot about that like an hour after it happened, but that exchange still stays with me all these decades later. And, I write about bosses in the workplace and how I sought out, and how I sought to sort of please them as well. There were these model male figures who were successful that I tried to emulate, who I tried to please. For the most part, all very positive, but some perhaps not. And I think we don't think about the influence that we have on young boys. Every exchange, and these do not have to be really deep relationships. They take cues. They are watching us. Um, they are watching how we receive them and perceive them. They are watching how we carry ourselves. They watch how we treat others. They watch the expectations we set for them and for ourselves. And I think especially in a time when there may be in some families, um, not the ability, if I want to be careful here, I don't want to say that fathers are missing in families, but I think in in families where boys are looking for others like them, and what does it mean to look like me? You look like me. You're not my dad. How do I, what lessons do I want to take from you? What lessons do I not want to take from you in deciding who I want to be in the world? Um, I think that's what I would say is important for uh, men today, and women as well. No matter how you identify, um, to really be mindful of the influence that we have, not just on our own children, but all the children around us.
Yeah, it's interesting. So much, I think, so you split this book up into various parts. And so a lot of it is your childhood, and you write somehow from that perspective of being a little kid. And it is really interesting to look back at those moments and see just how much you were able to soak up and how much the adult on the other side of the equation probably had no idea that one day you'd be writing a book about them, which is maybe maybe we should all be acting like our children will write books about
Sure,
us one
I think
day.
we should.
Yeah, I think we'd be better off. Yeah. Um, Towards the end of the book, you describe wanting your daughter to be proud of her family, and felt like a very powerful moment. You acknowledged that making that happen requires you to unlearn the shame that you had about your own past. So, big question. You don't have to have an answer, but how did you do that? And was writing this book helpful at all in that process, or writing your other memoir?
I think writing both books was incredibly helpful in that process, and it's still a process. It's not finished. I think our children also carry with carry sort of the weight of their parents, but also their parents' experiences. Whether or not you hold those experiences, especially if they're negative ones, inside you and try to protect your kids from it, invariably they influence your children. I think we can't discount that. I mean, I think especially, in the queer community, where so many people sometimes feel like they have to distance themselves from their families of birth, who may not have accepted them, and try to protect our kids from them or our past life experiences. You cannot wall that off. It does, in fact, it comes out in who you are, how you behave, and how you raise your children. You have to, I believe, I think you have to be willing to let go of the embarrassment, the shame, the guilt, the resentments that you feel about whatever your past may have been, the mistakes that you have made, in order to really help your kids, to help fulfill your dreams for your kids, which is to have meaningful, loving relationships with them. I I tell folks, look, writing a book is not therapy. Like, go to therapy. I think writing can be therapeutic. I find that writing about those experiences helped me um, bring a sense of closure, make meaning of them. And my kids are old enough also to read about them themselves, read about some of those experiences themselves, so that they understand, oh, this is why you are who you are, or I'm sorry that happened to you, or and not from a place of forgiveness, but sometimes just from a place of understanding.
Yeah, slowly pulling the curtain back as your kids get older, and you can be a person in addition to being the parent. Yeah, I think that's a tough thing to tackle. But certainly having a book, handing it over to them helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I also found that representation was a major theme throughout this book. You talked about looking for father figures in Essence magazine or family sitcoms. You also mentioned there's a section about like many of the gay characters that you were introduced to throughout childhood, and them being, murderers or child molesters. So, what role do you think representation plays in the lives of LGBTQ plus youth and also in the general public?
Yeah. I think it plays an incredible role. I grew up at a time, to your point, where, um, and I grew up in a very small town. So my understanding of what it meant to be gay came from, um, like sometimes the very disparaging things that my family said about gay people, even though I didn't know anyone who was gay, but more so from popular culture. And in terms of representation, uh, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. It was a time where the gay and lesbian characters on television, they were either victims or villains. They were either child molesters or predators or pedophiles, um, or drunks or drug addicts, or seen as being diseased. And that does a bit of a number on your head. And fortunately, popular culture has changed. We're clearly not all the way there, but you can understand for a boy who's growing up to feel shame. If that's who I am, the world is telling me that person is bad or that person is broken, and I don't want to be those things. Um, during the AIDS crisis, that person doesn't have a future. That person made bad choices. That person created their circumstances, and they are now paying the penalty for it. You don't want to be that person who. And on the flip side, I would say, um, from the 90s to the 2000s, you had Madison Avenue, you had Hollywood. Um, there was a demonstrable change, but at the same time, we were held up as these idyllic sort of role models. I call it the Campbell soup ad, and the Target ads and the Subaru ads. Shiny, happy people with two kids, you know what I mean, and a picket fence, um, who looked a certain way, who, were always very athletic looking and always very attractive and always very happy. And that is unfair. That's an unfair standard as well, um, to have gay people try to live up to. So representation matters, both negative and unrealistic, overly positive representation, I think, are both inherently dangerous.
Yeah, you talked about the pressure of positive representation, especially being out gay dads, and during those years where the fight for marriage equality was really like the headline. You write, we are gay dads, part of that newly discovered species of parents made famous by sitcoms, celebrity magazines, and commercials for Campbell's Soup. We are not famous, but we are part of a special tribe who have fought bigotry and biology to create a family. It should make us stronger. It doesn't. And I highlight that because I think working in the LGBTQ plus family organization, this is something we hear time and time again. There's this pressure to be perfect, or else, or else they're going to come in and they're going to tell us that we're doing it wrong and that we're not allowed to have it anymore. So you talked about it already a little bit, but I just wonder for the parents who are watching or attending, how did you navigate those pressures? What kind of advice do you have? It's a really challenging thing to carry.
Yeah, I think initially I don't think we handled the pressures well. I think part of the reason was, like, to be quite candid, I was working for an LGBTQ plus advocacy organization. And so in some respects, I was a bit of a public figure. And um, I look back on some of my writings at the time, on behalf of the cause, And I would also often bring in sort of personal anecdotes. And I could tell that looking back on those, I was censoring. I mean, there were parts of, I think our path to parenthood was not difficult. Our path within parenthood was rocky at times. And I didn't share those stories. I only shared the sort of sanitized versions of those stories. Also, to be quite honest, just out of, to protect my children as well. But by, you know, um, perpetuating those stereotypes, I don't think then that um, uh, I was benefiting other parents or the cause and certainly not helping myself. But I think and when I think I left working for the advocacy organization, uh, I tended then not to write at all about my family because we were going through some challenging times in parenting. And I think that's not the right answer either. It's not right to either overly sanitize the experience or to just pretend that those things are not happening. I think as parents, we have an obligation to each other, and this is my advice, to be honest as much as we can, even with our own friend groups, with our own family members, even with the people we trust. I'm not asking folks to go out and blog or write or do TikToks, talking about their parenting journeys, their ups and downs. But I think we at least owe it to the people that we love and trust and who are there to support us to be honest about what it's like being a parent. And not only, um, I think most importantly, in our own selfish interests, to get the support and the help that we need sometimes as parents. So that would be my advice is um, there's no invisible audience really watching over you to see, what your kids pack for lunch, how well they're dressed, how fabulous their Halloween costume is, you know, um, you know, uh, there's not. There really isn't an invisible audience out there. The invisible audience is us. And I think if we can take that invisible audience away, we can really have more deeper relationships with the people around us and be honest about our triumphs and sometimes, our travails.
Yeah, you have to be open to get the things that you want and need. And I think that piece is often missing. Um, in one particularly salient chapter, you talk about coming out at work and the pressure that you had felt to stay in the closet. And I'd like to say times have changed, but I think that we've made a little bit of a circle, and in the current political climate, this is something that people are returning to. So I wonder if you have any advice for people who feel the way that you did, feel afraid to bring their whole selves into their workplace or into their family, for fear of repercussions.
Yeah, certainly. I'm not going to tell everyone, come out at work, especially in this environment where the consequences can be dire. And I think we have a responsibility ultimately to protect ourselves emotionally, physically, economically. We have to protect ourselves and our families first and foremost. My advice would be reach out to others at your work. And I'm not talking about the allies. What I found, and I don't know, again, I don't find this in my workplace. Well, maybe. I would say the workplace is now, it's almost like a don't ask, don't tell in some situations. People may know you're gay, but you don't overly share, even with the other folks, perhaps, who may also be LGBTQ plus, in mixed spaces, especially. I think there's power in community. There's power even in affirming each other and asking, how's your wife? How's your husband? How's your kids? How's your partner? What did you do? Um, and I think folks, what I would not want to happen in this sort of environment where there's sort of been a backlash is for folks to be in a glass closet where everyone knows, everyone knows but you're still behind that glass door and not even willing to explicitly come out and talk to other folks in your community in your workplace. And so that would be the greatest piece of advice I would have.
That's great. It's like a full circle back to the passage that you read. You got to find the other people in your gym class who get
Yeah.
it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. We have about 20 minutes left. I welcome any of our attendees to pop questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. Um, a lot of this book is about boyhood, manhood, masculinity, but you are a girl dad. So, what has been the most surprising thing about raising daughters as a gay dad?
It was not understanding the role that peers and the world around them has in shaping them. And I think my daughters, I think, had an expectation of what it was for me to be a dad, what my husband was to be a dad. And in more ways than one, it was shaped by everyone else but us. So there was an expectation that um, I guess it's interesting that um, although we didn't have sort of traditional, you know, traditional roles in the house, you do the, you cook, you clean, those things, we did it all. There were times I think when they would choose one of us to do something based on what they thought the perception might be. So, oh, you come with me to this. Like, no, you take me over to their house. So they were falling into the traps of putting us in like traditional role models based on what the expectations and pressures that they felt from the outside world. As a girl dad, I had to just at some point tell my kids like I am not a girl dad because even girl dad is a categorization. So you watch these TikToks like, oh, girl dad, like um uh, overly smothers their daughters in physical things, girl dads, are, spoil their daughters, give them everything that they want. Um, girl dads are also, sporty and help their daughters, can do everything from like sew a hem on a dress to like take them out to soccer practice. Um, Girl dads are also a little befuddled and, a little clueless. And I'm like, I'm not that guy. I'm not the girl dad that you want that you see on TikTok or Instagram. I'm sorry, I'm not that. I am just me. And having to disabuse them of this notion that one or both of us were girl dads, I'm like, no, I'm just your dad. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not this, thing that you see on your feed that you want me to be.
Well, it just goes to show how many different images we have of what fatherhood should look like. And now we have this new one that has, popped up in our lexicon. But it's at the end of the day, you are who you are. You are the parent that that has come out of all of these years of all the other people who have shaped you. So I appreciate that. This book is really a deep dive into your past. I know this is the second memoir you've written, but did you find yourself surprised by anything that you wrote or by the journey of diving deep and exploring these questions?
I think I was surprised by the fact, like in the first book, Hyella, I feel like there were so many, because it was writing about uh, sort of my childhood to sort of mostly my young adulthood. I would say I probably, the end point of that was probably about maybe 7 to 10 years ago. No, a little bit later, probably. I'd say, yeah, 7 years ago. Things felt resolved. Like it was like, okay, this is my story. Here's how I've made meaning of it. It's still, I think I was surprised by, um, I think I was surprised by like how many, there were still some unanswered questions. And it wasn't a nice, uh, neat and tidy ending. Um, if you'll indulge me, I mean, I'd love to read. This is just short. It may take 2 or 3 minutes, and I think it gets at that. And it's towards the
Please.
end of the book. And it's not a spoiler alert. Let's see. I come to realize that I am no man's son, nor is any one person responsible for creating the man I am today. Instead, I am the imprint of the collective love of the men in my life, their affection and sometimes indifferent toward me. I'm a reflection of some of their hopes, as well as the dreams I held for them, but they could never achieve. I am the product of their failures, their disappointments, and their mistakes. I am the legacy of the cultural archetypes they fit into and the societal stereotypes they defy. I am what the world says a man should be and what my family expects one to be. To become all of those things, I forge together the disparate parts of manhood that feel at home in me, abandon those that have failed me, and nurture the few elements that I might grow into, so that ultimately I can one day say, I am my own man, a conception of my own self, and all that I have come to imagine, right or wrong, a son, husband, father, and a man to be. And I think in that is this, the title of the book is Man Made. It could also be Man Becoming. I am not done. Every day, I think uh, my daughters, my husband, the world around me continues to shape me into a better man, a better father, a better human being. But it's not done yet. And so I think I was surprised that in writing this, that as I came to the end, it's not like there's um, ever going to be sort of, there's not going to be sort of a fine point put on that. Um, that process of becoming and searching and interrogating and questioning who I am as a man and as a father will continue.
Well, I'm sure that's the question you always get as someone who writes memoirs. Like, how can you write a memoir if you're not at the end of your life, you know? And it's like, well, this is who I am right now, and I'm making space for who I'm going to be next, because you are always becoming. Really love that idea. And I'm glad you read that passage because that is one of the passages I highlighted. And then I was like, I can't read it because I don't want to give, it felt to me a little bit like a thesis of this project that you were on. So
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
Well, I think anyone that picks it up won't find it to be a spoiler alert, or a spoiler, but I do feel like, and one of the things I should say is, I tell folks that, it's in terms of the book, it's more of a memoir and essays than a memoir. Memoir, that form tends to be present tense, sort of critical moment of decision, a reflection on the past, and then brought forward to resolution. And this is told in a series of essays, each of which I hope I intended to stand on its own. So you can read one essay and feel like, okay, I feel a sense of resolution in this essay. I understand its thesis or the point that he was trying to make. And then I've grouped those essays into sections. Um, Boyhood, brotherhood, bachelorhood, manhood, adulthood, parenthood, so that each of the sections almost can stand on their own as well. Taken as a whole, it does have an arc. Like you read it as a whole, like it all fits together, like there's no duplication. But it was important for me, for anyone who picks up this book, a dad, a mom, a parent, a father, to feel like they could find something in here that was meaningful to them. I like to say not every essay will be for everyone, but the book is for anyone. Anyone who has ever grappled with this idea of who am I? How is the world around me shaping me into the person that I am and the person and how do I reconcile that with the person that I want to be?
Yeah, I think that's a great place for us to end because it's a good opportunity to plug your book, which I think everyone should go get and go read. Man-Made, I believe, is available everywhere books are sold. We will send out a link 24 hours from now. You will get an email with a link to purchase the book if you haven't already. I do highly recommend it. I think there's something in there for everyone. I am not a dad, but I read it and I felt like there are a lot of pieces that I learned from or could relate to. So I'm really appreciative, Steve, that you've taken the time to share some of the book with us tonight and to write the book in the first place. Um, for those joining tonight, we have events like this often, so you can check us out at familyequality.org/events. And you can also find a bunch of parenting resources, peer support spaces, and then opportunities to share your stories. So maybe you're not ready to publish a whole book on fatherhood, but if you are ready to share a blog or a TikTok like Steve was talking about, we are your people to do that. Steve, is there anything else that you would like to share or promote? Anything you want the world
No,
to know?
I hope folks pick up Man-Made, which is right here. My other memoir, which I reference, is called Hyella. That's also available wherever books were sold. And again, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to share my story with you all today.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're grateful that you're taking the time to do that. So, thanks for bringing representation to our community. The good and the bad, I think both are so important to hold. So, thank you for that. Um, and with that, I think we'll close out. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Keep an eye out for more events just like this one. And thank you again, Steve.
Thank you.